Happy fall, guys! So today I decided to make a video on the basics of starting your own garden and give you a few tips of things that we do in our garden. Starting small. So we have to remember that everyone has to start somewhere, me including. I started very small and I started in containers. So you have to figure out do you want container garden or do you want raised beds? Do you want to start in ground? I started with containers. Another thing to keep in mind is money. So starting a compost bin is a great way to save money, and collecting seeds that your family's going to eat. The vegetables that you already eat is a great thing to start collecting so that you can plant those. Getting perennials and native plants established is also very important. Now go over in your mind, what is a great place? You're going to need 8 to 10 hours of sun each day. Extremely important if you want vegetables. And you also want to make sure you're finding a spot that you can transform your soil. Odds are you don't have the best soil in the entire world, so you're going to need to add things like compost, manures, and you're going to want an organic garden. Well, I'm hoping you are anyway, because it's pretty important to me. So hopefully if you're on this channel, it's important to you. Watering. Are you going to collect rainwater? Are you going to use your hose? What are you doing for water? That is extremely important when starting a garden and getting things established. But you also don't want to put your garden in a place where all the water sits and collects. Flooding is a no-go. You don't want to have the roots sitting in water or your plants won't grow properly. Let's talk about raised beds. Less weeds, better water retention in the areas that have super sandy soil, better drainage in areas with clay soils, more growing space, less back hurting, warmer soil for a longer season. It's just overall the best option for a beginner gardener. It was just one of those things that you just can't go wrong with. Hugelkultur is also a really great option. If you don't really want to build a raised bed, you can pretty much layer all of the good stuff on top of each other and create this perfect raised bed for all of your veggies. And over time, it'll feed itself and feed the plants and biodegrade, and it'll create this perfect little haven for your plants, especially perennials and natives. So if you're still new to me gardening, I believe in creating a healthy ecosystem. I want my plants to work with my soil, and I want to do it as organically possible as I can. I want beneficial insects and beneficial fungi and all the good stuff in my garden. I don't want to do too much work. I want it to work for me and with me. And that's been my entire goal and mindset for probably the last 4 or 5 years. Now, seeds or starts, that is the question. Well, when you're planting your own seeds, you can kind of control everything that goes into the process. You are able to choose what kind of soil medium you grow in. You're kind of giving them a start in your soil as well to kind of get to know things. Now, when you do starts, they're more expensive. They're a lot easier though. You can kind of just throw them in. But again, they're more expensive. And for a new gardener, it could be easy, but you're also trying to get them used to the soil that you have and created. And sometimes that can be a hard task, especially depending on the soil medium and the garden place that they come from. I highly recommend trying and attempting seeds because you can also pick the varieties that are good for your area. Like for me personally, there are a lot of seeds that grow here in Texas that I can't find in the regular big box stores. You may be able to find them in a nursery, but probably it's going to take some time to get to know your area and get to know which nurseries are actually organic and better for what you're trying to do. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about composting. I am a huge composter. I think it is the best thing for your garden. What we kind of do is take a little bit of greens, a little bit of browns, some water, put them together, and there's our compost bin. We've done a tumbler, we've done a pile, we've done buckets in the ground. There's so many different ways to compost. It's just, all that matters is if you're doing it, to do it. There are also some simple ways to kind of make sure it goes well. If your pile is not hot enough or it doesn't seem like it's composting quick enough, go ahead and add more water. If your pile stinks and seems like it's too wet, go ahead and add more brown and dry material. It's kind of this thing that you kind of learn as you go. Hopefully this graphic kind of helps a little bit and you can see it properly, because I wanted to make sure that I put this information on there so that some of you who've never composted before can kind of get the gist and idea of it all. There are so many videos on composting that you can just hop on YouTube or, talk to your local farmers and nurseries. We also have animals. I'm not sure if you guys do, but we have animals, so that means manure. We don't have cows, so most of our manure is from our ducks, our chickens, our turkeys, and we also try our best to yearly do a worm bin. Unfortunately, Texas, it's really hard to keep one up. I need to start a new one because the other one kind of failed a bit after a couple years, but that's all right. But worm castings are great for your garden. I also use rabbit manure, which is the absolute best that I've ever tried. So if you know anyone who's raising rabbits, that stuff is gold. Seriously. And it's a cold manure, so you can actually put it right on top of your garden or in the soil, and it's safe. There are other hot manures like chicken manure that is going to have to compost for a while. So I go ahead and add that bedding into its own pile and I let it compost down before I add it to my garden. Very important. You don't want to burn any of the roots. Here's a picture of one of our tumblers, and I also want to add that sometimes when your compost is done, it's still going to be clumpy and lumpy, and you're expecting this beautiful, rich, light soil. That doesn't always happen. So what I do is I either sift it or I'll just put it on top of the garden, almost like a mulch, and eventually it'll break down into something better. And I'll take the big clumps out. Right here, this is me with our worm castings. That stuff is amazing too. But worm castings can be really expensive, so go ahead and start yourself a worm bin. I'm pretty sure I have a vermicomposting bin on my YouTube channel. If you look on the playlist. If I'm doing all this compost and different things, why in the world do I need a fertilizer? Well, year by year, your plants are going to suck up all that good stuff from the composts and things. And maybe even mid-year, they pretty much took up more than you bargained for. Why not grab a natural fertilizer and maximize the growth? Why not just get it back perked up, especially if it's in any distress? After a harsh summer and you have some perennials, why not add a little bit of juice to get it going? Every fertilizer is very different, so you make sure you read the labels because you want to do it properly. There are fertilizers made from different herbs and things like comfrey. Comfrey fertilizer is high nutrient content. It has tons of good stuff in it, but it stinks really bad. But what I do is I kind of break apart my comfrey and I put it in a bucket. I add water and I let it sit for a while. And then I use that high concentrated juice and I put more water in it. And then I will water a lot of my beds to make sure that that nutrition is going right back in there. Here's a little bit of information on comfrey. It shows you kind of what we do, 1 part comfrey in 15 parts of water when it's concentrated. It has been one of the best possible things. And I also use the comfrey in a lot of our skincare, like moisturizers. It's also used for mussels. There's just a ton of different benefits to comfrey that I highly recommend every garden going ahead and growing it. You can buy its roots online on Etsy, ETSY. I've had great luck with them. Speaking of herbs, I love growing herbs as perennials and medicinals and bringing all the pretty butterflies and beneficial insects into the garden. It's just beautiful. I honestly think everyone needs to make sure they have a good herbal garden, and it's good for eating, good for cooking. I know essential oils are the biggest thing right now, but at the end of the day, I really think you cannot get better than just some fresh herbs you get straight from the garden. So I would assume, I would recommend that you guys choose herbs that are going to fit your area. Make sure you're growing things that are going to help you. Like I look into companion planting charts. Things like rosemary and peppermint could be grown in pots, and they can also help keep the critters and insects that you don't want in your garden away. Chives, sage, other herbs like that can really help with cabbage moths, bean beetles, just a bunch of things. One of my favorite herbs to grow in the whole entire world is calendula. I love calendula. It's also called pot marigold. I use it in a lot of our skincare. It's been moisturizing and very gentle, especially on your children's skin. It's great for your face. Chamomile is another one that I grow. I grow it a lot for tea, but I also use it in our soaps along with calendula. There are so many different benefits to herbs that they can literally get their own video. But I was just trying to be brief. We do bee balm as well. It's beautiful and they look like little fireworks. Another favorite that I have in the garden herb-wise, I don't plant peppermint into the ground. I know a lot of people do, but it can get very invasive. So I go ahead and I make sure I have peppermint in a pot. It just makes more sense for me, and I can just clip it as it goes. When I hang my herbs, I pretty much just cut them in the morning or the late evening, and I hang them upside down and let them hang dry, or I put them on a net mesh, like an herb drying mesh that you can buy anywhere. You can buy it on Amazon, and I'll let it sit there and dry for a few weeks. Then I will get the blooms or whatever I need off of the herbs, and I'll just jar them up and leave them in a cool, dark place for skincare or teas, anything I need. It's very readily available. Now that I'm done with herbs, I'm going to go ahead and tell you some of my favorite plants to grow in Texas. My red amaranth, hands down, is one of my favorites. Amaranth is a gluten-free, ancient grain that is high in so many nutrients. You can dry them out, all of the grains, after it flowers. And you can use the leaves because they are edible and they're very similar to a spinach. You can cook them down and they are delicious. Another great veggie is daikon radishes. Oh, and butternut. Daikon radishes are kind of cool though because they can actually work as tilling your ground for you, like a natural tiller. It really helps break up some of the harder clay. So if you have some trouble areas in your garden, daikon radishes do amazing. They're really heavy and hard, so they work perfectly, and they're delicious. I really love cutting them up and putting them with potatoes and roasting them, and they're delicious. I enjoy them better than any other radishes. So the butternut, they grow fairly simple. I've done them on the ground and I've done them on the trellis. I prefer the ground method because we get so many vine borers. I'll tell you about that later. But the vine borers, actually, they take hold of the stems. So I like to bury squash stems in the ground, especially on the nodes, so that they can go ahead and root, and then I will water them in. And so when part of the plant dies off, there's still some more. Butternut have always been very prolific for me. We get loads of them. So I go ahead and I slice them in half. And I'll make purees, I'll make soups, I'll freeze some of the puree, I'll freeze them whole when I vacuum seal them. There's just a lot of different things you can do with butternut, and they're very shelf stable. I've had some in a cool, dark area in our pantry for quite a while. I want to say the most I've had it maybe 6 months, and they did just fine. We enjoyed them, and so that makes them definitely one of my top favorites. All right, guys, let's talk about something heat tolerant. I love Armenian cucumbers. They are prolific, they enjoy the heat, and they're delicious. Oh my word. Even the peel, you don't have to peel them. They actually taste really good, and I've pickled them quite a few times, and they're good. I really enjoy them. I highly recommend if you're in the South, they enjoy the heat, and that's pretty rare for cucumbers. Usually cucumbers get very bitter very fast. As soon as spring is over, they're kind of disgusting. And not these. As long as you are keeping them watered and they are in sunshine, they will be prolific. Armenian cucumbers. Now it's time for Chinese long beans. These are also called, there's another variety that are red that are called the red noodle bean. So snake beans, I've actually heard them called before. Regardless of what you call them, they're good. They have a nice snap. You can cut them up into multiple little beans. You can can them, you can freeze them, you can stir fry them. Stir frying is actually my favorite kind. I've never harvested like just for the beans. I don't even know if that's a thing. We eat them raw. My kids enjoy the beans so much that we kind of just snap them off and we eat them, and you can dip them in ranch or whatever you want to do. All I know is they enjoy Texas and it is a blessing. Okay, have you ever heard of Malabar spinach? Malabar spinach is very interesting. So the leaves are kind of almost succulent, but they also remind me of spinach. This is also very, very prolific, and it likes the heat. And when they drop their seeds, they will grow and grow and grow. This was also really fun for my children because once these grow and you harvest a lot of the leaves, they grow berries. So like towards the end of the season, you'll see like these green berries, and they'll very quickly turn like a reddish purple, and they can be used as dyes. So my children started peeling off all of the red berries, and they started playing like making soup and paint and dyes. I don't know. They just started playing with it. So all of them had like purple pinkish hands, and it's just been a fun plant to grow. It can also work as like up a trellis for like shade, but it's also edible, and we used it a lot in smoothies. Another absolute favorite squash is a tromboncino squash. It's also called a rampicante squash. I enjoy it because the seeds are all in the bulb, so you can cut all the other part of the squash and not have to deal with seeds. You can harvest it when it's young, and it tastes almost like a yellow and green and zucchini mixed together. And you can harvest it orange, and it almost has like a flavor of a butternut. So you can do both ways, which is very helpful. So like for when it's like the end of the season, then you can get your orange squash, but as well, like all the little squash that started growing, they're still edible. So it's that perfect mix of where you can get them small and you can get them bigger. I'm actually a huge fan of picking most squash green, even when it comes to like butternut. I enjoy green squash. I think they take on any taste that I can kind of cook them in when they're green. So it's one of my favorite ways to cook squash. Flowers, let's talk about the Indian blankets and the black-eyed Susans and the zinnias and the sunflowers and the yarrow. There's so many things to talk about. I believe every single garden in the entire world needs to figure out a way to incorporate flowers. They bring the pollinators, and they bring so many pretty colors, and I don't know, I just love them. And again, so many are medicinal, and you wouldn't even know it. Take some time to look up the native plants, like black-eyed Susans and Indian blankets are native. Coneflowers are native. A yarrow, it's native. So with those being native, they grow a lot simpler here, and it's easier to collect their seeds, and sometimes they even spread and they pop up all over places that you don't want them to until you want them to, until they start growing and it's so pretty and you just can't pull them. I enjoy making bouquets throughout the summer and the spring, being able to just showcase all of the beautiful flowers, especially zinnias. Did you know that every petal on a zinnia is a seed? So when you have a zinnia die, all those petals fall off, and then they can bring more and more zinnias. So it's really exciting to grow flowers, in my opinion. I believe that that's one of the things you have to do when you're a gardener. It also attracts a lot of the beneficial and the not so great bugs. They go to the flowers and the natives first. So it's very important to have those available so that they can kind of stay away from your plants that you really want to eat. So here's a quick little game I like to call friend or foe. Who can we trust when it comes to all of these insects? Well, I have 5 here, and I want you to take a moment and really think, what is good and what is bad? Keep thinking. Did you know that there are 2 bugs here that I would never trust? Actually, there are 3. There is the hornworm to the bottom left, and there is the squash borer to the top left, and then there's the top right, which is the cabbage moth. So that leaves the butterfly and the bee, who are our friends, our beneficial friends. So the tomato hornworm wants your tomatoes. He will eat them all. He will also eat your peppers. He's a sneaky little thing, and you've got to get him when he's small and green. I pick him right off and just throw him. Throw him to the chickens or whatever I have to do. Now, the top left is much more difficult. That is the squash vine borer. That red little bug goes onto your squash plant, lays a red egg, either on the leaf or usually on the stem. Its baby larva hatches, goes into the squash plant, and starts to eat your squash from the inside out, and eventually killing your beautiful squash plant, especially zucchini. So be on alert and pick those eggs while you see them. And if you see that red bug, I'm sorry, but I killed him. Now the cabbage moth on the right. So they're pretty difficult too. You've got to catch them when they're green. And I know a lot of people, when they start to grow their cabbage, they tie their leaves up to the front, almost like a ponytail, over the bulb of the cabbage, the head of the cabbage, so that all of those little bugs can't really get inside. It's just one of those things that you have to deal with as a gardener. But did you know that there are other ways to make sure that these bugs, you're doing all you can so that these bugs don't get your veggies? Well, I'm going to teach you that in a minute. Pest be gone. Growing more natives and perennials to redirect the native insects from your veggies to the plants. Remember I spoke about that? Growing more natives and perennials. That helps so much. It's almost like a trap, because the pests really don't want your plant, like your veggies. They want their native plants. And so that's what they're going to catch it with. I mean, if a bear had to choose, it would 100% choose the honey or the berries over other things. If you find evidence of aphids, you spray your plants with a mixture of liquid dish soap and warm water. That's something that people use all the time. You can plant different plants like marigolds, nasturtiums, even onions to repel the bad bugs. I even know people who dig up and put garlic all over their garden. I've done it one year and it's helped a lot. So sometimes you can just spray the bugs with a water hose. There are just so many different ways to keep bugs away. You can even infuse water with garlic cloves, and you can spray that way. There are different little natural homemade insecticides. I really recommend the natural ways before anything. A lot of people are going to say to put 7 Dust and all this other stuff on your plants, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to kill off any beneficial insects, and I also want to make sure that I am doing natural ways that are going to protect my family. Like if my son went out in the garden he just picked out a plant like that he knows that we eat, and he wants to bite it, I shouldn't be afraid that he's going to bite something that's going to be a danger to him or make him sick. That's one of my main reasons why I always go natural first. So another really popular thing is to wait until the evening or the early morning to put diatomaceous earth on your plants. Just be sure not to put them on the blossoms, the flowers. We don't want to kill the bees. They're really important. So what you would do is you would put them on the leaves and on the stems, and they kind of harm soft-bodied pests. They don't like that powder dust, and it's actually almost like, I don't know, like needles to their skin, as terrible as that sounds. Another natural way is neem oil. I've actually bought organic neem oil. Make sure it's the organic kind. Sometimes you can get the fake kind. I shook it up and I put it in a spray bottle with water, and I sprayed in the evening time, and it's actually helped a lot. It smells very nutty. It's kind of a funny smell, but it tend to work for me. It's just another good option. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that name because it's just not me. So BT is what I call it. I've never used BT in the garden. It's too much work, honestly. I just like things to be a lot less effort. But what you would do is you would get almost like a little, I don't know, you would put the BT into a syringe and you would syringe it inside of the stem of something that would have like a vine borer, and it would kill the larva. There's different ways to use BT. I'm not huge on it, so I can't really tell you too much. So just make sure you're reading the instructions and doing it the proper way so you can avoid any danger, but it is considered a natural way. Interesting fact. So did you know that wasps are actually good for something? Hard to believe, I know. I always would ask myself, Lord, why in the world did you create wasps? Like, I just don't get it. But then one day I was in the garden and I was just sitting on the floor because that's just something I do. I was sitting on the floor and then I literally watched a wasp fly like the speed of lightning onto my tomato plant, throw a hornworm that I didn't even know was on there on the ground, and then the wasp started to eat it. No lie. It was the craziest thing I had ever seen. But guess what? I was just excited because I was like, wait a minute, Lord, they're meant for something. They are actually beneficial to my garden. Like, they literally destroyed something that could have destroyed our tomato plant. I don't know if you guys are praying and anointing your gardens, but I'm just going to tell you something. I was so thankful and so blessed to have seen that because I may have not caught that hornworm. And this is a real life picture that I took in shock that that wasp was just destroying that hornworm. This is something that you could call a victory. I cannot stop this video without letting you guys know a little thing about garden care. So, an easy way to keep nutrients into the soil and avoid constant watering in the heat is to add a layer of wood chips. Mulch is so important to the garden. I cannot express this enough. I have dove into the Back to Eden gardening or the permaculture method. This is also used with the hugelkultur beds that I had talked about earlier. Mulch is going to protect your ground. It is going to make sure that when you water, your plants are going to receive that water, and the soil is actually going to remain nutrient dense and even damp. You want mulch in your garden. Now, some more garden care is checking your plants daily. Once they start growing, you want to make sure there's no terrible funguses and yellowing of leaves. You want to know the problems and really just check them in Google. You can't forget weeding. Weeds will go from very small to very huge very fast. Weeds become a problem, and know your weeds. Take pictures. Use your phone. I know a lot of iPhones nowadays, you press something, a button on the camera, and it'll show you what the weed is, what the plant is. Use those things to your advantage. You want to keep the plants watered. You don't want to overwater though. And you don't want your plants to get bitter, especially your veggies, especially like cucumbers. They will get bitter if you are not consistently watering and maintaining like that good wet soil, but not too wet. If you're kind of concerned, you can buy a soil kit overall and just check the nutrition on your soil. There are so many out there. You may have some soil tests saying you need nitrogen. I like to buy a little thing called blood meal. It really helps with nitrogen, especially if I'm like growing onions or something. Now, all in all, I hope this video helped you. I really want you guys to know that we all start somewhere. And as the years go on, as the garden seasons continue, everything we do is going to change just a little bit. And that's the fun in gardening, is learning year by year, talking to people and changing your methods. I just want you guys to try and know that you don't have a black thumb. You can do this. I did it. My family did it. We started from just this little green spot, and you can do it. So don't ever get discouraged. Thank you guys for joining me. Please make sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. I hope you learned something. God bless you guys.